There's a jingle toy. Use the other toy that doesn't jingle.
We're recording.
Okay.
Hello,
That's going to be
everybody.
part of it.
This is Joseph Simone. Simone.
Whatever. It just depends on how Italian you want to be.
Yeah, if you want to be super Italian, it's Simone Marchigiani. And Joseph is
exactly.
an expert on something called the Enneagram, which is a personality metric. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What is Enneagram?
Yeah. So the Enneagram itself is actually just a symbol. And it's like an ancient symbol. But what we're going to talk about today is the Enneagram of personality, which is a way that we have learned how to use the symbol to represent 9 distinct personality types and the way that they interact. And so just a really basic overview of what that symbol is there are 9 points on the symbol, which signify 9 personality types. There are 3 centers on the symbol that represent 3 types of intelligence, body, head, and heart. And there are also 3 instinctual areas of focus, and that just means basically human instincts, and they are self-preservation, sexual, and social. And so what the Enneagram does is help us understand we have a dominant type in each one of those 3 centers of intelligence, and we also have a dominant instinct of the 3.
So we're talking about a 9-pointed star. Each point represents a number, and that number corresponds to a certain personality.
Right.
So you essentially have, there's 9 different personality types, 9 main core types. And then each person also has a main instinct to go along with their type.
Right. So it's like you have a core type in each of the 3 centers. So your core type might be in the body center, and then you have a secondary one that could be in the head center, one of the 3. There's 3 in each, and then a tertiary one. And same with instincts. You're gonna have a dominant instinct, secondary, and tertiary. And what that basically does is tell you, like in terms of the instincts, is we need all of the instincts, but we overuse some of them to the point where it's debilitating, and ignore and eclipse, say, the one on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and then we'll show like a picture of what it looks like to lay it all out.
Yeah.
But we'll start with so it's not just like, people have heard of Myers-Briggs and astrology, and it's not just a quiz that you can take, although you do have a quiz on your website that can help people start to pinpoint what their type might be. But it's not something like, I prefer to be indoors versus outdoors, or I like to talk to people versus cats. It's like really observable behaviors and certain characteristics and imprints that you can sense in people in the way that they behave, the way they relate to the world. And therefore, I think what you've noticed in your work is that people will mistype because they'll do an online test, and that test will sort of validate something that they consciously know about themselves, but it isn't really giving them that full perspective on their personality.
Right, exactly. What you said, like imprinting, is important. Well, actually, we don't necessarily know if the type is something that is imprinted on you when you're young or if you're born with it, although it seems more likely that, because we can sense the type really, really early, so it seems more likely that it's, who knows, genetic, or it happens in utero. We have no idea. But it's important to think of it as imprinting because it's something that is unconscious. So it makes it different than, say, Myers-Briggs and some of the other personality things that I was really obsessed with when I was younger too, is that it's not just like a list of behaviors such as like extroversion, outgoingness, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of tests, or like Strengths Finder. There are a lot of tests that kind of just test based on these metrics and just give you graphs of like, this is how extroverted you are based on all these questions you answered. These are more like psychological profiles. So I guess you could think of it as, some people might find it a bit negative, but they're almost like problems. Like each person has a deep problem or a mistake, right? And it's like how the ego is created. It's a mistake that we think that something is true deep down, and it's not. But what's like what you said about mistyping is really important, because those things are unconscious. It almost never happens that you just read the types and you're like, yeah, that's me, and you get it right. Okay. Most of the time, our ego wants us to believe that we have certain characteristics or that we have these certain motivations, right? So we say often in Enneagram that it's about core motivation rather than behavior. Obviously, those two things are connected. It is about core motivation, but nobody knows what their core motivation is, right? So the best way to type this Enneagram, to get your Enneagram type, is to, of course, study the types as much as you can, but it's to do your best to also listen to the feedback from other people. Let people like the team at Enneagrammer, which is my business, help you type yourself by giving you feedback. And what we tend to do is point to unconscious things, micro expressions, things you said, a general tone, something that, for example, 3 of the types are called superego types, and we call them that because the type is structured around, in some way, around being good or doing good, more so than, of course, we all have a superego. So when, say, we're typing a video, we maybe count how many times the person uses language that's somehow related to their superego, even if they don't feel like they're a good person. They may be a really rebellious person or doing bad things or something like that. We're still counting those micro details. How many times does the person reference morality in a way that maybe they didn't even realize? And so when you start to add those things up, you get this unconscious psychological profile. And it's extremely powerful because it's like the kind of thing that you could be in therapy for years trying to figure out exactly what that thing is. And this is a way to just, it doesn't solve the problem, but it's a way to unlock and say, oh, okay, I know what I'm looking at.
Like, I think it's been really powerful because I've followed your method and I was obsessed with it. And it's a series of videos to find core type, and then wing, which we can talk about later, and even tri-type. And then you use actually collages, which is like our subconscious pull towards certain images and how we assemble them and what images we choose to find out what the instinct stacking is. And it was interesting because when I submitted a video, we were really, there's a cat.
Yeah, she's, sorry, I got 3 cats. They're going to be in and out.
Yeah, just cat. Yeah, the cats are part of it. You know all the cats types too.
I do.
Yeah, we can talk about that later too. But I think what we thought I was a 4, one of the types in the Enneagram, for a long time, which is a heart type. And then immediately after I submitted a video, which I thought would just confirm my 4 status, it was very clear it was a 6. And maybe just to like anchor us in an example, like what did you see that showed that it was a 6? Because 6 is a head type, and what's 6 like?
Right. Yeah.
So
it was trickier with you. Let's talk about you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it was trickier with you. Actually, it's good to talk about 6 because I think 6 is a type that is very common, but not common in the sense that everybody is the same or that it's boring. It's common in the sense that it's a common type structure, but all 6s are really, really different and dynamic. And I think it's a type that has trouble typing themselves, actually, because of the nature of it. Anyway, what was tricky with you is that we knew your tri-type, what we call it, which is the type within each center. So we knew in the heart center that you had 4, and in the head you had 6, and in the gut center that you had 9. We just didn't know the order. So what happened when we saw your video is that we saw a lot of energy in the head, and we saw that you were not doing the thing that, say, a core 4 would do, which is consistently check in. There's a certain way that 4s kind of check in with their own image. So the image is too much to explain in this video, but the heart center is connected to a sense of image, almost like looking at a photograph of yourself and wondering what it should look like and focusing on that. You had a heart type, everybody has a heart type, but your core was more in the head center, and we were seeing you kind of scan and dip in and play with words and play with ideas a lot more than somebody who wasn't core in the head center would do. And there were some other singles that I can't recall right now, but it's tricky because you did have 4. So we were correct about that element, but it wasn't your core energy. And 4 is the type that people often mistype as. Again, I've written a lot of, I don't want to go into too much detail because I've written so much about it. So please, visit enneagrammar.com and check out the blog and stuff, because I've written a lot about that.
And you're a core 4.
I am, yeah. Yeah, I don't like to tell people though, because it makes it sound like I'm like trying to be the like least common type, and I don't care.
Whereas I'm just a commoner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know.
But I think it's helpful. Yeah, yeah, we do. I think it's helpful though because there's 9 different types and there's 3 instincts, and so there's this this expansion of the different permutations, like the different possibilities that somebody could have, because everybody has their tri-type, right?
Yes.
So in my head center, so I'm core 6, my wing is
Yes.
7, my
Yeah.
heart is 4, and my gut is 9, and then my instincts are self-pres, social.
Right.
And your instincts are social, sexual. You're a 461,
Yeah.
413, and or
Yeah.
416.
461. Yeah. Yeah.
So we have these like specific imprints, like these specific permutations of all of the different possibilities of type, and then you know, even if you take 2 people with the exact same structure, they're still going to be different and unique in their own ways because they have their own personal experience. But
Yes.
let's talk about the instincts, because I think that's
Yeah.
like really can show up, especially in this time with the social distancing,
Yes.
how each
Yeah.
instinct stacking is going to respond to the specific situation that they're in. So you look at collages, and that's actually really cool because you can start to see that show up even if you're not well trained.
Yes.
When you look at what images we're drawn to, it starts to show what instinct stacking someone might have in a pretty plain to see way. But maybe just go through the 3 instincts.
Sure.
And then let's talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, the instincts are huge. They're so important. Basically, so we all have, you know, a cluster of different instincts, different levels of self-preservation, different levels of sexual or mating and attracting, and different levels of social, which is just basically all communication.
Mm-hmm.
And we need all of them. And essentially what happens is that there are 3 of them, and they end up in what we call a stacking, which you mentioned, which means there's one that we focus on a lot. There's one that gets sort of ignored, and then there's kind of one in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stacking, so you mentioned being self-pres social, that means that self-pres is the one that you focus on the most, social is your secondary, and sexual is the one that is at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, you know, just hearing those words, it might be sort of misleading. There's a lot of misinformation. Again, hard to explain them all in a quick video, but essentially self-preservation is, I mean, it's the least complicated to understand. It's all levels of self-preservation. The only thing that needs to be understood about self-preservation is that over-focusing on self-preservation doesn't mean you're really good at it. It means that you have more of a neurosis about it than somebody who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, somebody whose self-preservation lasts has a neurosis about ignoring it. But people who are self-preservation, for example, might focus on one element of it and ignore another. So there are people I know who are just like really crazy about saving money, and they feel like they always need to have money coming in. But they eat McDonald's and they don't treat their body well. So they could actually die from that anyway. Or the opposite, people who really, really focus on diets, but don't really care so much about money. I'm using money and food just because those are kind of the most basic like things for body health. In terms of sexual, it sounds like it's about doing it, and it's not. It's actually more about just attraction systems. So most of the population is sexual last. What sexual it does is, again, we all have it, and it doesn't has nothing to do with how attractive you are, but it's how much are you focusing on the system of attraction. And we always like to use the example of like bowerbirds who spend so much time like building a nest and learning dances and peacock feathers and all these things that evolved for no evolutionary reason other than to be a sexual attraction device, so a mating device, right?
It's like the instinct of pulling into oneself, isn't it?
Pulling, so like being able to kind of hook somebody else and be hooked yourself. And what's sort of important but also dangerous about the sexual instinct is that it's self-erasing, right? If you think about what sexuality is, and if you really, really want to merge with somebody, you suddenly disappear. It's like, if you think about even just what getting pregnant is, it's kind of like there's something growing inside of me, my whole physiology, everything is changing. Now social, the thing is, sexual in itself is just that. It has nothing to do with children or wanting to have children or wanting to get pregnant, right? So it's weird for us to think about those two things separate. Yeah, exactly, right. They're not just in terms of the way that these instincts work, it's not the same. The instinct to care for young is not the same as the instinct that it takes you to like build that nest and grow big feathers and do a dance and attract, right? So the instinct to care for young is social. Okay, doesn't mean that everybody that focuses on social likes kids or is good at caring for young, but anything that has to do with uh, the instinct to protect others in a selfless way, like you have no benefit to protecting young or protecting anything, is social. Anything that has to do with any communication at all is social. So all the instincts are really important, but maybe I'm biased because I'm social dominant, but I think the social instinct, or humans' social instinct, is why we are so successful as a species, because we can communicate in ways that other animals sort of can't. There are other animals that are crazy social, like bees, and the way that they kind of all work together, the way birds fly in flocks. There's all kind of examples of even lion prides, animals working together as species. And so, everything is, language is social. I think, yeah, you get the point. Right?
Relationships,
so, and then in terms of,
right? It's not just about,
sorry?
It's not just about social networks or society. It's about relationships. Exactly. So it could even be in the context of a one-to-one, you and your partner.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's any kind of connection at all. Connection is not sexual, right? That is attraction. It's just chemical. Okay. So everything that can, and those two things can be mixed together, right? You can have sexual and social attraction and chemistry and all that with a person. They're not separate in the sense that they always occur separately, but in terms of our instincts, they're not the same thing. So a lot of people, again, misconstrue the sexual instinct and identify as sexual when they are actually sexual blind or sexual second. But because most people are not sexual dominant, it doesn't actually do society. Like if we just think about, if you were like God or a creator and you were like, I'm going to put a bunch of types on the planet and they're all going to be different, what would make the most sense would be if most people were self-pres social, because that's the type that is going to be best at, en masse, not at an individual level, but en masse, they're going to be best at creating some kind of structure, like keeping food growing and all that. If you have a person who's so overly focused on the sexual instinct, well, again, it's self-erasing. It's not self-protecting. So they're all important.
It's like self-pres and sexual are almost like the antithesis of each other, because self-pres is all about your ego boundaries, your limitations, your physical limitations, or your physical boundaries separate from other people. And sexual instinct is about merging those boundaries, like dissolving them and just becoming one. In order to feed social, I mean, so the sexual instinct is to feed that need to connect, but it's not the same thing, as you said.
Yeah. So the need to like just connect, like again, anything that's beyond just being chemically hooked is in the realm of social. So of course, we're modern human beings. Those things are very often connected. And I would even say that like just the appetite of sexual desire is not even sexual. It's more in the range of like self-pres, just kind of like physical stuff. So then in terms of collages, one of the unique things that Enneagrammer does is we type people. So it gets really hard to type instinct stack, because like you said, like there's all these moving parts, right? You have your type in each center, you have a wing, which is like influence from an adjacent type, and then you have sorry, I'm just looking at one of my cats is sick and is vomiting. Pause it. Just hold on, cut this out.
So we're back. We had a mishap with a cat who is suffering from anxiety, which is resulting in physical manifestation of gastrointestinal symptoms. She is good now, though. So we are back talking about the instinct stacking. And the last thing we were talking about was
collages.
Was the collages, and how Enneagrammer has a unique way of assessing instincts.
Right. So because these processes are unconscious, it's really, really hard to type Enneagram type and instinct. Instinct specifically is so unconscious because like instincts just in general are unconscious. We may think, you can kind of look at your life and say, like, I've spent my entire life in business and I focus on money. I'm probably self-pres dominant, and that would make sense. But still, there are a lot of people who are self-pres blind that have a ton of money, like, I don't know, Madonna. So one of the ways that we've discovered, this is something that we slowly discovered, instinct stacking shows up because instinct itself is like pre-verbal, even though like language is a manifestation of the social instinct, the instincts themselves, or the instinct to communicate, is pre-verbal. So it's really hard to even talk about these things. They're not things that we have any concept of. They just happen, right? The Enneagram type is essentially a way to meet instinctual needs. So it's like the Enneagram type is doing something, it has some kind of false belief, and it's using that false strategy to meet an instinctual need. So the instinct is really, it's the basis of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the collages, what we noticed that is we had people, as many as possible, just kind of like create a collection of images that appeal to them in some way, or that they, in whatever way, there's no rules. It took a lot of collages to kind of like work it out, but we can assess what their dominant instincts are. Because it's, it takes, of course, this is a very intuitive process. We do have like a metric where we've kind of outlined some things, but it's still definitely an intuitive process. Like, just to give kind of an example, because things like status have to do with communication and people, that's an area of the social instinct. When we see people that have a lot of things in their collages, like architecture with large columns, or like big, beautiful, ornate doors, or chairs that look like thrones, and they may not even notice, they may be maybe they don't like that whole scene, they don't like royalty, and they don't like anything that feels arrogant, but they're sort of naturally, in a way, doing social status in their own way. So it's an intuitive process where we're looking at those things and we're saying, okay, this person's probably not social blind, probably not social last, because we see these elements in the collage. So yeah, it's just a way of, it's kind of like an intuitive typing test. Instead of being like, do you, like giving a question like, yes or no, do you think about food a lot, or something stupid? It's like, this is a really kind of detailed, personal, intuitive way. And what we found is that we have a Facebook group, which is where most of our discussions happen. And we found that, even including me, I've made so many collages, but it's such an amazing exercise to make a video, but especially collage. It's an artistic exercise. So you didn't necessarily, for the most part, create the images, but there are like millions of images that you could choose, but the very specific choices that you make are so personal to you. And when you make a collage that you like, it feels so good to look at it. And it feels even better to like show up in the group and share the collage. And yet compare, so like you're stacking, if you're self-social and compare your collages with another self-social, they might be totally different, but they still point to the same instinct stacking. So it's like a fun way to just share. And I actually find it's like therapeutic. It's like if people get tattoos or do things like that, something artistic, to make themselves feel better when in any kind of situation. I find the collage exercise can actually do that, and wasn't originally the point of it. So
yeah, it's like you're creating images, you're assembling images that are some way a reflection of your inner self, so it feels good.
Right.
There's something satisfying about it. And it's really interesting though, because so in the group, and we'll post the link so people can join or take a look, but people will so people love the collage exercise. So you have people like spontaneously submitting their collages or redoing collages, and then they'll get feedback on them, either from members in the group who've learned how to type collages, or from the admin. And it'll be funny because if someone doesn't agree with the stacking that's showing up in the collage, they'll sometimes try and rationalize the image. Well, I picked this because this is my favorite animal, or I really like this thing. And it's funny how our conscious mind will try and interrupt what is this real implicit process happening. And there's
That's
a reason
exactly
that, there's a reason that you'll be drawn to an image, and it won't be a conscious one necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, when I made my first collage, so my stacking is social dom, and when I made my first collage, I thought I was social last. I was like, no, I'm antisocial. I mean, part of social is being antisocial, right? That's still social. It's still a focus on social in some way. But when I made my collage, it just had tons of celebrities in it. And just like, I mean, this is really simplistic. Like, this isn't the full metric that we use. It's not as simple as we see celebrities or social, but my now business partners and friends were like, your collage is full of people. Like, you've made multiple collages. They're full of people. They're full of famous people. They're people that mean a lot to you. People like Bjork or Beethoven or whatever. They're people that mean something to you, but they're still people, and they're like portraits. Like, you made the human face, the human body, all of that was crucial to your collage. If you were social blind, it's not that it never happens. There, again, if we see social blind collages with people on them, they usually don't have famous people on them, but they may have people on them. But a lot of times social blind collages don't have any people on them. But yeah, it was just that kind of thing. And I tried to rationalize it. Oh, well, like, I don't care about famous people. And they were like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's something that you valued about this that made you
Exactly.
choose this over and over again. And that's important to look at. And so the more I looked at it, it was like, yeah, it's true. I don't care about famous people. I feel like I'm this sort of antisocial person, but there's something instinctual that made me choose those images because I have a focus on the social instinct. And the social instinct is very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to it. Again, I can't explain all of it, but so there's a lot. One of the things, just a side note, my website, enneagrammer.com, I've written all of the content. And it's free. So a lot of people feel like, in order for something to be, not that there's anything wrong with charging for content, but this isn't for, neither of us really cares about, like, this is just kind of a side project for us that we're really passionate about. And I could have released all of this information in a book, but I just honestly was like, you know what, because it's the kind of thing that people are constantly mistyping, I just wanted to put the information up for free, because this isn't my way of making income anyway. And I'm only saying it because I feel like some people only value information when they buy it, or when it's like in a book, like, oh, you have a published book, it must be good. And a lot of the published books about the Enneagram are like not good at all. So I have a lot of information that's free, and it's valuable information, even though it's free and on a website.
And if anybody is, how should I say, triggered by the way that was delivered, this is a 4. So basically it's like, yeah, other people are trash, I'm the best.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, yeah, it is a very good resource, and Joseph's like extremely knowledgeable about this, and your test has been validated many times. So the test is like a good entryway into just getting a sense of what your type could be, and then you can go into this deep dive where you get your collages assessed, you get your type. You can present a video and have your type be typed by the admin team too. It's like, it's great. It provides so much self-knowledge, which is really cool. And it's interesting with the collages, because you can even see the stacking, like with social sexual, which is your type stacking. There's a lot of glitter, there's a lot of colors, a lot of flashiness. And mine is self-pres social, and it's a lot of like earth elements, a lot of nature. There's food, but it's like glorifying food in a way that I wouldn't consciously think about. It's like there's an avocado in my collages, or there's something about these like earth elements.
Yes.
And even the way that the elements interact with each other in the collage. So if you see elements like oozing into each other, there's something about the sexual instinct that creates that. Or if there's a separateness, it could be self-pres. So it's really cool. There's like so many ways to analyze it, and they really stand out to you.
So it's abstract, but it's only, the material isn't abstract, but the way that we have to get to it is abstract, right? Yes, this all sounds very abstract, but there is something real behind it.
Totally. Yeah, you're looking for specific things. It's like the way that there's a cool diagnostic element to it. It's like the way that I would work as a naturopath, where I'm looking at specific cues to understand this deeper map that you're working from, this deeper network of information. And so let's talk about how, the type. So if somebody goes to your website, they figure out what their type stacking is, they figure out their instinct story and their type. Now, how would that person be suffering right now? Let's talk about. So, like, how would social instinct be responding to this this pandemic or COVID or social isolation?
Oh, so we're talking about I mean, it's an interesting question, and I don't know if I have a clear answer, just because it's I guess it's complicated. One of the things, again, about the Enneagram is that it's never clear cut. It's never as simple as saying that, people who are social blind don't care about social distancing, which seems like it makes sense. And in some way it might be true, but it's also not, because everything is kind of connected. In order to feed the sexual instinct, you need to go outside. And so you need some level of social skills. And so everything kind of works together. But I think how to put this? What type cannot do is tell us what people's opinions will be, but it can tell us how the strategy or way that they might react to things like this. So for example, I've seen type 6s just be like, type 6 is one one type that will kind of naturally react against the status quo or information. So they might, but at the same time, want to find trusted information. So there are sixes who are going to be on social media yelling at everybody to stay home. And then there are others who are like, into conspiracy theories. So there's a reaction to truth with six.
Mm-hmm. Or a toggling between them, flip-flopping.
Always a toggling between them, exactly. So that's one say. So again, you can't say that sixes will all think this way or that way, but you can. This is the kind of thing that
you see behavioral patterns in a six, and so how that actually shows up in concrete terms is going to be different depending on that six's context or personality or what their knowledge is. Like a self-pres person might be concerned with like contracting the virus or their health symptoms or money or finances or
that's an interesting thing to bring up actually, because you would on some level, yes, the self-pres person is going to be concerned, but the self-pres person, in a sense, in some way, depending on what their focus of self-pres is, has already expected this to happen. And has maybe already prepared mentally. It's already on the horizon of things that are possible for them in their brains already all the time. So maybe the scope of this is like, oh, I didn't think so. But there's some level of like feeling rugged enough to weather whatever comes at them, even if it's stressful. Whereas maybe a self-pres blind person, they might be flippant and ignore this entirely, which might look the same as the self-pres person who is prepared in their head. Or the self-pres blind person could be like, oh my God, this is really bad. And I never thought anything. I'm kind of in that camp where I'm like, why are we even taught? Like, it seems when you have that blind spot, you're like, this is so stupid to focus on this. But then you're like, it's not stupid. Like this is a real thing and we have to think about it. But I don't really want to. But again, that same behavior you might see in somebody who's self-pres dom, but just with a different motivation that they may not even be aware of.
Yeah, it's interesting because somebody could be acting a certain way because they are blind to something. So what you're speaking of is it's not even in your realm of consideration. You were blind to it.
Yes.
It's not in your awareness. Just like, I don't know, nitrogen gas. You don't know how much is in the atmosphere. You're just kind of unaware. But somebody may be reacting in exactly the same way because it's actually taking precedent, consuming their energy. So they're maybe rejecting it or they're being consumed by it. And so it's really difficult to tell by just looking at how someone's reacting or thinking about it. But are there, so I know that we know, so with the Enneagram, we can diagnose, we can understand what someone's instinct stackings are, what their type is. Is there any prescription? Like, is there any way that knowing this information can help us cope with these situations?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's, so I'll admit, like, there are lots of people in the Enneagram that are so amazing. My personal focus in the Enneagram has just been like accurate typing, because I think it's step one, but it's like this step that 90% of people don't like get past because they're not typing correctly. And then it starts to not mean anything. So I may not be the best person to talk about like really how to cope, but I will say that there are things that, like for starters, just knowing what you're doing, just like, it's like you unlocked something. And all of a sudden if you choose to, you're observing yourself. You're constantly sort of hovering over yourself and looking down at your own ego. And that's like extremely powerful. Even if you don't have this particular strategy that you're like, oh, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to, meditate. Just watching yourself, because you can't help it. Once you know, it's just there. It's like, that ignorance is bliss thing, except it's not bliss. But so but there are things like so my friends do, maybe I'll link their stuff, but they live in New York. They're not in New York right now because of what's happening, but they do something called breath work. And so again, I'm not qualified to speak on what it is, but essentially it is a form of getting in touch with yourself using breathing and breath. So it's similar to meditation, but using breath. And it's apparently a very powerful experience. And again, that's just another way to get past the ego. All this stuff is a way for us to get past this like personality structure that we have, and just kind of, it's really hard. It's not like the kind of thing where you're like, I'm past it, I'm done. It's impossible. But it's like, we're just trying our best to like push past that structure because it's a false structure.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, I mean, like many forms of psychotherapy, it's understanding the ego, not wanting
Yeah,
to get rid of it, because you can't function in society without an
yeah,
ego. But it's like, is the ego
exactly.
strong? Is the ego able to
Yeah,
cope? Is it flexible enough to deal with different situations? Is it in the way of me solving certain problems?
yeah,
Is it impeding,
yeah,
me living in accordance with my values? All these things. So it's like just different ways to access healing in that sense. But
yeah.
it's not necessarily the
So
point of the Enneagram. The point is awareness, like you said, or just
yeah,
self-knowledge. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think somebody like, because you know the Enneagram, like somebody who say knows their type, or you know their type, and comes to see somebody like you will have probably better strategies than I do, just because you're a mental health professional. And again, this is just like, okay, that's the thing, we've unlocked it, we can look at it, coping, how to deal with it, how to make it healthy, how to nourish it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's,
Mm-hmm.
there are people who do just that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like sixes that come into my practice, they're obviously very common, because six is a common type. Um, and it's like, this is a person that's going to want to know why they're being prescribed things. They're going to need to trust in my authority. They might have doubts about what I'm saying, and
Mhm.
it's not really about me, and I don't need to take that personally. So there's all these different elements, just understanding how somebody works, that you can help relate to them, and
Yeah.
have a better relationship, form trust, all that stuff. Very
Well, that's
interesting.
big. That's one thing. Just knowing somebody else. Again, typing is really hard, but if you actually accurately type somebody else, you stop reacting
Mm-hmm.
in ways that just in your own ego, because you're all of a sudden you're able to empathize with somebody else, right? If you're
Yeah.
doing something that I don't understand, I might think about the six strategy and think, okay, she's doing that.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not my strategy, and she doesn't understand mine. But if we can just be like, okay, I understand that that's a thing. We just assume that everybody is kind of like how we are,
Mm-hmm.
that incredulous, that like, well, why would she do that? I would do this. That's, we react that way. Well, this is what I would do, so why would they act like that? But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the way people work.
Mm-hmm.
So this helps you understand that.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like every time I have an issue with a relationship, or I'm talking to you about something, which is what a six will do, is sort of like gain social proof, or try and talk stuff out, or try
Yeah,
and like
poll others. Yeah,
pull others. Yeah, pull
yeah,
others. Yeah.
poll. Yeah,
You'll give me the synopsis, be like, oh, that's just a 6.5. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
and then it
yeah.
stops us trying to create meaning, and trying to, well, it
Right.
stops my spinning,
Yeah. Well,
which
it
is.
stops like projecting. Again, with sixes,
Mhm,
will often project, but it stops us trying to interpret other people's behavior
mhm,
based on what we understand about life.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's great. It just helps you, allow people to be, and accept
Right.
them, hmm
Yeah.
which is really helpful for interacting with people. So Joseph, so where can we find you? So your website is
Yeah.
enneagrammer.com. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, Enneagram. There's a lot of M's and N's, so maybe you can
I'm gonna write
like
it. Yeah,
post the. Well,
it's
write it
gonna
down.
be
Yeah.
in the video description. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you also
Yeah.
have a Facebook group, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if you go to the website, join. I know like some people don't have Facebook, which is unfortunate, but it was just kind of like the best discussion forum that we could find. So yeah, our Facebook group. You don't have to pay for services to come into the group. Lots of people come in, share collages, and just talk.
Mm-hmm.
And just there, people have made friends. We have a really nice community of people that talk to each other. But I do recommend, this isn't me just like plugging my services, because like I said, this isn't my main source of income. We charge for our typing services because it's a lot of time and a lot of work. But to get started, if you just want to kind of dip in, I have just I think it's just $12 a test. That's just like an online answer question test. That's imperfect, as I've mentioned through this, but it is a really good start because it kind of ranks your types. So
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a play. There's a lot of stuff to look at. So if you're new, it just gives you a place to start. Because like, okay, I scored high on 9 and 6 and 3. Let me read those. Let me start with those. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
start with 4 or 5 or whatever because I didn't score. And that's a place to start. And then you do research. Then you can come into the group, chat as much as you want. But if you really want to nail down, like, okay, I want to know what my typing is. When we do type, so we type instincts via collages, and we type the 9 types via a video. So
Mm-hmm.
you give us, and social media. Sometimes we just look like, essentially like an Instagram account is a collage,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a collage, like so people's Instagram. That's actually a great way. Instagram, or I mean, not so much Tumblr because people don't post themselves on Tumblr, but that kind of just like a collage of images that meant something to you at some time. Even something like people are like, oh, I don't really use Instagram that much, or like I just post whatever. Like that means something. It all means something, right? So it's a way for us, and it's not just like, here's your type, like take it and leave it for life. Like you can do whatever you want with it, but it's a way for us to be like, we give you a full report, a very intuitive report. Again, one things that makes us different than other Enneagram teachers is there are 3 of us that really, we don't do any typing unless the 3 of us have agreed, right? So maybe only one of us will do the write-up, but there's 3 experts kind of looking at this, pulling out signals, discussing, looking at everything you send us, social media, whatever, and then we give you a report and say, this is what we saw. Take it, digest it, do what you want with it. But it is really, there are a few people that will type themselves correctly. Like if just, probability, it can happen. But really, for the most part, like I would say like more than 50% of people just aren't typing correctly.
Well, I mean, I know you didn't type yourself correctly initially, and it was a process to get to hone in on your type, and same with myself. And I think it's difficult because there's 9 types, and you can read through them and relate to pieces of any type. And it's not about relating to it, which is how we typically will approach personality testing.
It's not about resonating with something. It's unconscious.
Right. And so it takes sometimes people that don't know you at all, pointing out specific signals that are accessing that unconscious. Because
if that's an experience, right, that feels, you're putting yourself on the line. But if you're ready for that, it's such a great experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, dissect me. Tell me what you see.
And it can be alarming, especially if people like that you don't know are pointing out things about you that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that and I don't like it. But that's what this is. That's what inner work is. It's if you're interested in mental health at all, this is exactly what it's going to be. It's going to kind of tear you open a little bit, but
and it's not good or bad. It's not pointing out something bad about you. It's the types are just passionate. Like they just are. It's like saying a squirrel is this and not this. It's like, it's not, you're not judging the squirrel. It's just how,
like, or a sense like you can say that, I mean, because I said, I mean, the types are problems, they're false strategies, but everyone has one. So it is just the way life is. It's not like somebody saying, you have obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not something, not everybody has that. Everyone has some kind of, sorry if that dinging, can you hear that dinging?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Anyway, everyone has a type. Maybe not the same type as you, but again, see somebody that has the same type as you. It's not a box. It's not the type of thing where, you're a 6 and every other 6, you're like, oh, we're the same. It's not like that. It's something more unconscious than that. You will get along, even the people that you get along with, some people are like, oh, I really like this celebrity. I really like this person. They must be the same type, or they must be similar. No. Right? There are some similarities, compatibilities, right? But for the most part, no. That's not even how we build friendships or relationships.
It's very
if it were that simple, this wouldn't be that interesting, right?
Totally. Yeah. If it was just like, you're a Libra, you're like, okay, great, cool.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So. Right. This is great, Joseph. So thank you for talking with me. So I'm going to post in the video description. People can check out your website. They can check out the Facebook group, and maybe we'll have you back on. We'll go through the 9 types, but it's just so much information that we wanted to just zone in on some concrete examples and give people an introduction. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.